All right. Hello. Good morning, YouTube. Get this stuff tweeted out. Pull up there. Where's the blue sky? Shit to keep track of.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not okay. Picked up the wrong code. Better delete that. This is great podcasting right here. At least it's only on the YouTube. At least
Yeah.
people won't have to listen to this on the radio. I ended up putting the link down um, from the Zoom meeting
Mm.
on the tweet. So unless we want a bunch of people in that Zoom to come into our Zoom, I guess I'd have to invite them in anyway. But
Mm.
uh, yeah, just a little technical difficult because Rob's an idiot, but difficulty. All right. I think that's the right link, folks. If you're on Twitter right now, I guess if you're on Twitter, whatever. Let me get this podcast going.
Mhm.
Hello there and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. I'm having a little difficulty right now. It's 9:23 a.m. Central Time on Friday, February the 21st, a day later than we normally do this Hotspot podcast. I'm Rob Howe, joined by Scott Docterman from The Athletic, fresh off of a trip to New Orleans for the SEC Big Ten powwow. We'll certainly talk about that. We got a big wrestling meet in Carver Hawkeye this weekend. We got some very important basketball games in Carver Hawkeye this weekend. So a lot to talk about, and spring football not that far away, and the NFL Combine next week, which Scott will be going to, and we will let you know when the podcast will be next week. It won't be in the morning because Scott's busy in the morning, so we'll have to adjust to that. But I'll let you know on social media when we get that nailed down. How are you, Scott? How you feeling after the swing down south where it was 30 degrees?
Yeah, it was disappointing. I mean, it was warmer than it was in Iowa. I acknowledge that. But when you're going down there and you're thinking, all right, what's it going to be? And first day it's 60, but then it's raining. And you're like, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of it. And then, so but I'm still like, hey, I got to go to Bourbon Street. I've never been there. Go to Bourbon Street, grab some amazing food, as you can imagine, on the French Quarter and that area. Next day, Wednesday, I was really busy for the most part, didn't eat until late and I was pretty exhausted. And then yesterday, I'm like, I'm going to go check things out. And I look at I'm like, well, just wear a sweatshirt out, 30, wind chill 18. I'm like, that's not fair, man. Yes, it's warmer than Iowa, but it's not like 30s anything special. So anyway, that part was blah. But other than that, I'm not complaining, even though it sounded like I am. It was good. Love the cuisine is as good as it gets, different. So I decided to go different and loved every minute of that part.
Yeah, my wife is a big fan of the beignets. She
Mhm.
hit a few of those places down there. Some of the like really popular places that it's kind of like the cannolis in New York City, or
Mhm.
it's you
Yeah,
know local to them, and they do it better than anywhere else. Like
yeah,
you don't get a Philly cheesesteak in like Kansas.
yeah, right.
get it in Philly because that's going to be the best place to get a Philly cheesesteak.
Yeah, it's like if you go to New York and or something, you don't want to get corn on the cob there. You want to get it here.
Exactly.
Stuff like that. But then likewise, we had a beignet brought into our workroom.
Nice.
They just said, hey, here you guys go, and we're like, and they were amazing. I never really had one. If I had, it's just been like sitting out. And I never really thought differently. But
Yeah.
the way that they had it, it was like, yeah, this is addicting. And I had two. I really didn't want any, but I was like, everybody kept eating them, and they're like, oh, these are the best ever. And I'm like, well, okay, a good advertisement here. So I, yeah, so it was a lot of impactful stuff going on. I know we'll talk about that in a little bit. And, um, even though no decisions were made, there were a lot of the conversation is pointing to a strong direction right now.
Yeah, the groundwork, the framework, those things, they all have to, I mean, it's a process. And obviously, this week was a big part of that process of getting to where they want to get to.
Yeah.
And yeah, we will talk more about that, but we're going to go more local here, micro, with the Iowa angles first. And uh, we saw where do you want to start? You want to start women's basketball? You want to start men's basketball?
Let's start men's basketball. They just played the other day. I did get a chance. I did watch it on my iPad while I was down there.
I
Just
saw Rutgers. Since we last talked, they played Rutgers, Maryland, and Oregon.
Oregon.
Lost two of
Yeah.
the three. I did not see the Maryland game. I was in St. Louis for volleyball. I did see the other two. So if
Yeah.
but I could tell from the Maryland box score. I looked at the shooting percentages of Maryland in the second half, and I'm like, I seen that movie. I don't need to
Mhm.
watch the replay.
That was rarely have you seen a game go like that one.
Yeah.
First half, I knew they couldn't keep that pace up. I mean, they were making everything, but it was basically like a power play for Maryland's offense. After the Four Nations the last week, which was awesome. It was like a 5-on-3 every time. It felt like, so even though Iowa was up 51-47 at halftime of that Maryland game on the road, they had a pretty good environment. I talked to their AD a little bit about it in New Orleans. I knew that they couldn't keep up that offensive pace, and I knew their defense is going to struggle, especially with being down people. So, but I was surprised by the total score and how much they did not score in the second half. I thought that was a little bit of a surprise that they just really took a dip down, where Maryland's offense was still kind of humming. The other day they had a chance. They had a chance against Oregon, and I think what we're seeing is this is where I think that not having an Owen Freeman, they'll well play. I don't think he played. I can't
He's
remember.
played very little. He's played a little bit, I think, in each of the three games, but you can
Well,
tell
he was out against I know he was out against Rutgers, I think. Yeah, against Rutgers.
yeah, I know. Yeah, he may have missed the Rutgers, and I know he went on the trip. And again, I didn't see the Maryland game. I don't have the box scores in front of me. I know he tried he was in the starting lineup the other night, but barely played and wasn't very effective when he was in there. I think he's been trying to gut it out. And
15 minutes, yeah.
yeah, I think he's trying to gut it out, but he's just not as effective as when he's healthy, which is, that's without Freeman and Koch and him being injured, they're compromised as it is. And I think when you watch, I think it was symbolic to see Josh Dix. He the whole operation of his shot, the lift, it wasn't there. Kid had busted his ass for 40 minutes, and
Yeah.
I would have went to him too with the last shot,
Yeah.
him or Peyton. Either way. But that's the position they're in now, Scott. They need Peyton and Josh to carry him, and there's a cost for that. If you're playing them a full game, they're going to be gassed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Josh played the entire game, didn't come out once. And, when you're playing that much up and down, up and down, up and down.
And he plays hard
Yeah.
on both ends.
Right. He's a really good on-ball defender, one of the better ones Iowa's had in that, under Fran, I think. And to try to make that kind of a shot on the last play of the game, and it's not a pass the ball around the perimeter set shot, it's step back in the face, get lift, all those types of things. It's hard. And of course he didn't. It got, deflected, and they didn't get a chance to really get a good shot on the tip. And you lose by 2 in a hard fought game against, and now Oregon has been a really interesting team to observe. I think, going into the Big Ten play, they're in really good shape. And then they've mostly, I think whether it's travel or the competition catching up to them or whatever, have kind of not bottomed out, but really fell down. And
that's that too. Kind of how long the basketball season is. A lot of teams have dips during the season, and it's like, okay, how can we navigate this thing to peak at the right time, which is March, right?
Yeah.
Because there are teams that like go in to March and you're like, man, they're dead in the water. And then they recapture what they had when they played well earlier in the season. So it's tough to tell. But you're right.
Yeah, I mean, you look, they're 8-8, they're
Yeah,
19-8, and they were, they had a pretty significant, if not losing streak, but stretch where
yeah.
they were like 1-6 or something like that. I'd have to look it up, but um, so that was a tough game for them too. And they've been okay. They're in the tournament. They're 34 net. And then that's just another opportunity Iowa let slip away. And unfortunately for Iowa right now, when you look at the Big Ten standings, that the teams that were below them are winning games.
Hmm.
Northwestern wins decisively against Ohio State. I think Penn State's won a game.
Well,
Washington's
Penn
won a game.
State killed Nebraska the other night.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talk about the meek inheriting the earth here. You
Yeah,
got Penn State killing Nebraska and Northwestern crushing Ohio State. And it's just, okay, those are two teams you kind of thought if they stay down there and you beat Washington, you're okay. But now, they're only one game in the win column above Washington and Penn State and tied with Northwestern, which means they have really no margin for error. Now, you know, watching them beat Rutgers the way they did, and Rutgers certainly is not a team that you go out and expect them to win four of the next few games either. But
and their
but
season has not played out the
no,
way they thought.
not at all. But
No,
but when you look at the teams left, they beat Penn State, but again, Iowa's played hard. I'm going to give them credit for that. I don't think that they deserve, like a bed of roses for their, hey, you went out and played hard. But teams that struggle, have injuries, seasons aren't going the way they are. A lot of times they fall apart. Iowa has not fallen apart. The second half against Maryland, but that is a tough environment against a really good team, I think. Sometimes that happens, but to beat Rutgers, to be within a shot of beating Oregon, this team's not just gonna roll over. And Washington coming in, Iowa's got some tough games, and they got some decisive games. I mean, they got to go to Northwestern. That's going to be, I think, loser's going to struggle to get to the Big Ten tournament now.
yeah,
And Washington's a team that you have to beat to get there,
yeah,
because going to Illinois on Tuesday, that is a horrific matchup for Iowa. Even though Illinois is, maybe as disappointing as any team right now in the Big Ten. I mean, Rutgers is by far the worst, but out of the good upper level, they're to me the most disappointing. They are among the best teams in the country in rebounding, and Iowa is the worst, in rebounding margin by a long stretch in the Big Ten. So you've got those two factors at a place where historically good Iowa teams have gotten mopped.
yeah.
I think this could be it's just a bad matchup, and that happens. And so I think with Iowa, you've got to take care of the games where you can win. And I would say, if they can beat Washington and beat Northwestern, then they make the Big Ten tournament. If you lose those games, you're not going. And then the off season starts earlier, and that's where the questions lie. When I was in New Orleans, I had some side conversations with ADs, and kind of the consensus was, yeah, Beth's got a tough decision to make. It's kind of, they would bring up men's basketball and say, yeah, that's tough. She's got a tough decision to make. Their own prompting, not me asking. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean, the just on the surface, without even getting into the nuance of it,
yeah.
it's your all-time winningest coach
Mm-hmm.
who has the program hasn't bottomed out, and obviously, as you said, the way they're playing right now, he's got them engaged. The
Yeah,
team, the fans aren't engaged. That's the
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
You got to put people in the arena.
Mm-hmm. It's 100% true. And I have the ticket scans, Rob, from all the games except Oregon. And I mean, 2,800 against Minnesota, 4,700 against Purdue. That's, and I've had people try to justify it or say, well, that's probably because everybody's invested in the women. I don't think so. I think there's a lack of interest. People just aren't interested in going because I'm not saying they're two different audiences, because they're not. There's a lot of connection there, but there always were a group of 5,000 women's fans that always went to games. And there was always a group of 12,000 Iowa men's fans. So maybe you're peeling off some that maybe, okay, we're going to go to two games this year. Well, let's go to the women. We like the women better. That's the crowd you're losing. that you're going to lose to the women, but it's not that. It's the other people that would buy season tickets. Now they're only going to a couple of games. It's the people that normally would go 3 or 4 times a year that now are saying, I don't even care, and that's the apathy, and that's the problem. And as we've said before, and I emphasized with an exclamation point based on the conversations about everything I had in New Orleans, I mean, money is a major factor with everything. I mean, and when you're having all these issues over the years, and yes, it's administration, it's foundational, it's everything, but Fran has also been there 15 years. So it's not like, I know it started before him, but he's had a chance to take it to a different level and plenty of time to do so. And he did in some areas, but then there were other areas where it just never, when it was slipping, there was never an attempt really to change direction. And I think, the rest of the season will be telling. I expect him to play hard in most of those games.
Does it matter? Do the results really matter here unless they were to win the Big Ten tournament?
I don't think so.
Probably not. I mean, something has to be done. Mm-hmm. No matter what happens on the court the next however many weeks.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about with Beth. And you and I have talked about this throughout the season, once it started to go this way and we started to get a feedback, and we didn't have the numbers of 2,700 or 4,800 or whatever you're saying, but we had eyes. We were there. Right. We're looking around going, this ain't right.
Yeah.
We've been here for a quarter of a century and this isn't normal. And so obviously we knew something, we were heading this way. And where I kind of stand on this. And I've written about it. I think you can compare the success of Fran and Kirk. I think it's comparable. We could sit here and argue about who's better and what, and there are some apples to oranges there. But bottom line is, whether it's Kirk or whoever, the football program is putting asses in the seats. It's selling merchandise. It's got donors to contribute to NIL money to make the program better, to make more money, to keep asses in the seats. That's what you need to keep doing. Basketball isn't doing that. Fran is winning up till this season. Injuries, again, we can debate that. I don't want to do that. I think about what Fran could have done beyond the wins and losses and putting guys in the NBA and the successes that he has. And what did you give the fans? Are you giving them intriguing home games, non-conference? Are you giving them primetime league that they had for years? Are you giving them shirts and skins to engage them in the program? Are you, what am I missing? There was another one that I was thinking of.
The in-state games.
The in-state games, exactly. You don't have games at the McLeod Center or the Knapp Center. Iowa fans loved going to those places and mixing it up with the people that they went to high school with that may have gone to UNI and they went to I mean, there's so much interaction there. We see it with Iowa and Iowa State all the time. There's Drake and UNI feeds that too, and that's communal for the state of Iowa. It's gone. So that's where I think some blame goes to Fran.
Yeah.
He took things away from the fans. And in doing so, it allowed apathy to set into the program.
Right. And that's been my point for a long time, that if you're going to take something away, you've got to replace it, and think of it in a business perspective. If you're taking something away from your customers, and we used to talk about that in media, it's like, if you're going to eliminate coverage of something, well, what are you replacing it with? And if you're not replacing it with anything, then you're going to have a disappointed customer base.
Or you better reduce the cost a whole heck of a lot. As far as I know, the basketball tickets are not cheap.
No, they're not. And like, here are some of the scans. The first time this season that they hit 4,000 scans was Northwestern at 4,019.
Was that was the first Big Ten game, right?
Yeah.
So that was like late November, early December.
Right. I mean, the rest of them were.
But what were the games?
Yeah. A&M Commerce, 2,600 people in the stands. Southern, 2,700. South Dakota, 29. Rider, 31. USC Upstate, 38 and change, almost 39.
So
So
we got no Gavitt games. We got no ACC Challenge teams coming in anymore. What are
nope,
you giving fans?
right. You're not giving them anything. Then you Northwestern 4,000, which you think about, it's like that's like 30% full for a Big Ten
Yeah.
opponent. They went down to the end, the last second shot.
Big Ten
I
opener at that.
Yeah,
And the
right.
kids are still on campus.
Exactly. Iowa State. This one is most troubling, even though it has the best scans. 10,696
Wow.
in an almost 15,000 seat arena. So you're talking probably 70% full, and the ounce attendance was in the 12s. And what, probably 2,500 fans were in Cardinal.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. So you're talking about a 775, 8,000, something like that. Iowa fans for your in-state rival.
Yeah.
That's by far your best scan one. Then you play New Orleans, not LSU, New Orleans, and there was 3,800. New Hampshire, 6,009. And then you get into the Big Ten, 4,500 for Nebraska, 7,900 for Indiana. Which that's a Saturday night game against Indiana,
Yeah.
and that's that you're talking about 7,000 empty seats for a team that usually generates. The most troubling one of all for me by far and away was Minnesota. Students had just gotten back on campus. Martin Luther King Day was the day before. 2,877 for Minnesota on a Tuesday night. Wow. Penn State on a Friday night, 5,500. Purdue, this one again is second troubling to me because numbers at that time, they were number 7 in the country. Tuesday night, I believe it was a 7 o'clock, 6 or 7. And I know, well, we couldn't get there because of work, whatever. 4,700 for Purdue. And then Wisconsin, which was a noon tip off on a Saturday, 89. So that was, what,
Yeah.
6,000 less than sellout.
Yeah, Purdue and Wisconsin are both ranked.
Yeah, same week. It tells me that the fan base's level of engagement with this program is turned off, that people aren't interested. It's not that they're saving their money for women's basketball or whatever. It's that they're not interested. And that's the worst thing you can have. You want them obviously loving your team and supporting them and being excited. Second is, well, at least be angry about it because you're still passionate. But when you walk away and you don't
get mad again.
Yeah, get mad again. Right. Exactly. But you talked about the non-conference games, Rob. They played 3 neutral site games.
Yeah.
Quad Cities, Sioux Falls, and Kansas City, against 3 opponents. I'm not saying that they would have been much higher in attendance than some of those other games, and I don't blame them if they want to play one, neutral site game in that one of those places. That's all right, but it's just not and what has Fran done to replace it or to energize the fan base? Some coaches would get on the microphone. Hey, we love having you here. Thanks so much for supporting the Hawks, and hope to see you again. Elisa Bluter would do something like that. Jan is very vocal like that. Go to different places, shake hands. There's just none of that. And here's the basketball we're playing today. And he's done a good job as a coach. No, I'm not going to debate that. And he's developed some really good players, certainly some great people. I mean, there haven't been any shitheads on the team, as far as I think. And they've been very competitive for the most part, but people are tuning you out in the Big Ten conference. You gotta think you gotta think differently. And they're headed for their second losing season since 2012 in the Big Ten. And that's usually when things kind of, you reevaluate your situation, and probably, we know which way it's trending.
Yeah, well, and obviously we'll talk about this more. It's a deep subject and a difficult one, complicated one. But I mean, bottom line is something needs to be done. Uh, and as Scott heard down in New Orleans, others see it, other ADs see it. They know this needs to be addressed, and it's going to have to be. And we'll see how it's handled. And we'll talk about it as we go week to week. But I don't want to take up all of our podcast just talking about the men's basketball coaching situation and the
Yeah,
state of the program.
yeah.
I'd like to switch over to the women's side, Scott, and some interesting things happened in the Ohio State game, and I watched the second half of that game. I did not watch the first half, so I can't speak to that, but I did see the wild ending, and certainly was an entertaining game. And I almost came out of that game, Scott, feeling better about Iowa women's basketball than I did when I went in, even though it was a loss.
I'm the same way. I missed the last 5 minutes of regulation and overtime because I had to
Nah,
speak
nothing
it.
really happened.
Yeah, I know. It didn't sound like it was just boring ho hum, right? I was speaking at a class at the University of Iowa that day at 1 o'clock. So then I was listening to Rob Brooks in the car for the last part of it after watching the first half and most of the third quarter. And and then I didn't know how the result turned out until we were going through these live stuff, blogs and social media and talking in the class. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, they lost in overtime because they were kind of down the whole
Yeah.
time, but it was kind of close. Um, yeah, I'm with you for sure. And even though Ohio State lost to Indiana last night, that doesn't bother me. I mean, teams are going to lose like that. I think USC and UCLA are far above everybody else in the league.
And
But
Indiana's a quality program.
yeah,
That's not
right.
a bad loss.
And if they came to Iowa, maybe the same thing happens.
Yeah.
So, but I think this was one of those really big tests for this program that they'd won 7 straight. They had a major upset. They beat teams kind of in their neighborhood, but this was a top 10 team, and they were on the road at a place that they lost last year that has really good players, and they were trailing and they weren't hitting shots and they were struggling. Yet they kept coming back and they kept fighting and they were playing really hard and then they were making shots. And then, it told me that outside of the upper elite, and I mean, maybe that's contradictory because they beat USC, but,
Yeah.
but, you know, most times they're not.
Perfect. Kind of a perfect storm that
Yeah.
day. And that's not
Yeah.
to discredit them at all,
No.
but they had some intangibles going in their
Yeah.
favor.
Yeah. I mean, if you're playing at a home or neutral or their court or a neutral site, it might be pretty tough. But outside of the top 8 to 10 teams in this country, on any given day, Iowa could compete with just about anybody. And I think a month ago we weren't saying that. And after winning what 7 in a row or six, was it 6 in a row? It was 6 in a row, and then they lose in overtime. Now they're playing UCLA, which will be a really tough game. It told me a lot about this team that there are going to be programs like in Ohio State from a different conference that are going to go, damn, they're in ours. They're the 7 team and we're the 2. I don't want to play them. That kind of thing. And so I learned, what I've seen from their growth is once Lucy Olson kind of became the player that we thought she could be, and has really been more aggressive and even more important, confident in her
Mhm.
performances, that Iowa has, then everybody has fit into their roles. Sydney has become an incredible junkyard dog, one of the best you're ever going to find because she's getting double digit, not only double digit, but like 12, 15 rebounds a game to go
Yeah.
along with 11, 12 points. That everybody else, Kylie Feuerbach is playing at a high level. Everybody is finding their roles, their niches. And it's been really, you can see that this team is playing with confidence. They're playing hard, and they're going to be a tough out for teams. They're not going to, whether it's the Big Ten tournament, which is going to be really tough, or the NCAA tournament, which will be competitive as well.
How does Iowa handle Lauren Betts
Is she
on
going to
Sunday?
play? Did she play last night?
Did she?
I don't know. Let me
I
look.
thought they said she might have a chance last night, so I figured she would play on Sunday. But obviously, if she's not playing, that's huge. If she is playing, it's, what it usually is a matchup nightmare.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, she did play.
yeah.
She had 22.7 rebounds, 6 blocks.
Yeah,
How
she's
did
but obviously, as I was saying, she's a mismatch. Iowa's playing two different style posts. What do you do against her? I mean,
play
obviously,
three? Make sure Ava Hyden gets in there because you're going to get in foul
yeah.
trouble.
Three at the same time.
No, just hack a shack. It's going to be like the old Luke Longley, Bill Wennington, and uh, Will Purdue. Yeah, Will
Yeah.
or Bill
Bill,
Cartwright or earlier.
yeah, it was a bunch of those guys that
Yeah,
they ran through there through the championships.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things, she's going to get hers,
yeah,
but you don't want her to have like a historic
yeah,
day against you, drop a 40 spot on you or something like
yeah.
that.
And you got to be smart. You can't just foul her to foul her. If you're
Yeah.
gonna, that's one thing that I think Iowa still needs to work on, and is committing the right fouls. There are some times where you
Yeah.
want to be
I
aggressive, you want to
understand.
be physical, and if somebody's going up to the basket, foul them, make sure they don't make the shot. That's you're going to live to fight another, play. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But reach in fouls, in between the half court line and the 3 point line. Don't do that. Don't do anything. Be aggressive, but be smart. So I think if they can avoid some of that, because they're gonna have them, they're gonna need them. You got Kiki Rice, who's fantastic. You've got,
Yeah.
I mean, this is a great team. I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
right
more than
there,
Lauren Betts for sure.
yeah. I mean, this Lauren Betts is just a mismatch that you're just gonna,
Yeah.
it's a mismatch. You're gonna hope that, but another thing is, then something that they don't do well enough is go up strong against the post. Make her foul you on your way to the basket. Get her in foul trouble
And Hannah's good at drawing fouls.
when she wants to.
Yeah.
Sometimes she tries to be too
Yes.
finesse around the basket, and it's like, no, go
She
up
can.
strong.
Yeah, because she's crafty by the rim. I mean, she gets the ball up over taller players because she's usually undersized
Yeah,
compared to most posts.
exactly. And if you could do that, if you could draw a couple fouls in the first half, it
Yeah.
changes the complexion. She has to sit out at least for a given amount of time. And then you feel like, okay, we can try to do something while she's out. Or then she becomes less aggressive. So then she's not trying to block your shot as much. And because you got to pencil her down for basically the point she got last night. You
Yeah.
just hope she doesn't get the blocks. 22-7, she's going to get that.
And that's like you're talking about. You get her in foul trouble. That's one of the biggest components because not only is she defending Hannah or Addie, if Lucy's driving to the basket, she's going to swat her shit too. But if you got her in foul trouble, she can't swat it from the bench.
Yeah, exactly. Lucy's mid-range game is really good, and her shot it's not block proof, but the way the
Yeah.
way she shoots, it kind of avoids a lot of that, and you're going to see, no overextension. But if you don't go up strong at the basket, you're going to get your shot blocked, and then your confidence is going to wane, because that's what we've seen a lot. You and I are products of the 80s, and saw Patrick Ewing dominate the Big East, and then of course when he was with the Knicks, that there's a lot of swats that kept guys from going to the lane, and
Yeah.
not just the physical play, but just the
Yeah,
shot.
you're right. Some of it's just reputation, right? You're like, I'm not going in there.
Yeah. I'm not getting my shot blocked. That's like an embarrassment. It's one thing to miss a
Yeah.
shot, but to get your shot blocked, it's kind of that. It has a different connotation.
Yeah, getting dunked on or
Mhm.
getting your shot swatted are like the two things in basketball you do not want to have because
Yeah,
you're gonna hear about it.
yeah,
Like if you're playing pickup, you're gonna
yeah,
and you hear
right.
about it on the floor too. And
Yeah,
Peyton learned that the other night. He got teed up for a little chirping against
yeah,
Oregon, but
yeah,
you knew that was a retaliation chirp for somebody
yeah,
else.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the other one would be getting a three drilled in your face, but
Yeah,
in some ways that's a little different, because that's more skill,
yeah,
and skill is, Caitlin could do that and did that. But physical play, block, is more physical, than that's something you want to avoid. But that being said, that's an important game on Sunday. I want to see him play competitively, and I want to see him play smart. The result is the result. It's not going to change what I think of this season or what their trajectory is of the postseason. The two games after that, do have, an impact. And that's what I'm more focused on, which is going to Michigan. I think that's a game that it's winnable, it's challenging, but they're in kind of like the Minnesota and Nebraska games. They're teams that are in your neighborhood. They're teams that could decide whether or not you're a 9 seed or a 7 in the NCAA tournament. And, or, a 9 seed or 6 seed in the Big Ten tournament type of thing. And then you finish up with Wisconsin, which is you've got to beat them. There's just no other way. I mean, they're not a good team. They've got one great player, which I'm still surprised is there. And this year will be I wouldn't be surprised if she's somewhere else next year just because she's so good. But
yeah, that's a can't lose game seating wise. You cannot lose to Wisconsin at home seating wise. You lose to UCLA. Yeah, that's not really going to ding your seating. You lose at Michigan, probably not going to do a ton. A similar team. It's on the road. So really, it's opportunity when you look at it for Iowa. These next 2 games are incredible opportunities to boost your seed.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about right now. It's how do you make embolden and strengthen your case in the NCAA tournament and the Big Ten tournament too.
Because we talked about it before. You want to be as high as you can for when you're playing on the road.
Right. I mean, look, let's look at the Big Ten tournament, for instance. I mean, right now there are, let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right now they're the 10th seed in the Big Ten tournament, which means you're playing the 7, which means then you're playing the 2. And if you could somehow win, 3 games, but let's just say 2. Let's say you beat Michigan and Wisconsin, and you get up into the 10-8 territory, and maybe you somehow get to be a 6. Maybe, there's a couple losses ahead of you, and, maybe you're tied with Michigan or something like that at that position. Then you end up being, you're playing with Ohio State in a 3-6 game. That's different. You're playing the 11, then you're playing the 3. You feel like Iowa can be competitive in those games.
Yep.
If you're 7-8 and you're playing USC or UCLA, again, they beat USC. I know that, but the situation was a situation.
We're talking about odds here.
Yeah, right. Let's be real.
Hey, on paper, the odds are. We know that doesn't always hold.
Yeah, exactly. They're not in their favor. So that's just not a matchup you really want. Let's put it that way. So, and if you can get to a 3-6 and you win, you win 2 games in the Big Ten tournament this year, that's a big deal. And that might get you into that neighborhood of 4-5, even in the 3-6 in the NCAA tournament. And if you're going to a 3-6 game or a 4-5 game, you are, you're in better situation than we ever thought they would be in.
Yep.
Let's say, like 16 seed right now, if you're in a 4-5 would be Oklahoma, maybe an NC State.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Oklahoma there'd be some local interest with that.
Yeah, I think so. Lisa would be like, oh, what? But even beyond that, a TCU, a Kansas State, teams that have better resumes than you, certainly, but not teams that you go, damn, we're not going to win that.
Yeah.
North
It's
Carolina.
going to take a Herculean effort, and they're going to have to be off for us to win this game.
Yeah. So but then again, if you're stuck, okay, now you got to go to Storrs, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Or South Carolina, or even LSU. It's kind of like, well, you win a game but that being said, we won't judge the season until it's over, kind of the old Gary Barta rule, right? But I do think that they are, if they do get to that point and they win one game in the tournament and they play a team like that and they lose, I still think it's been a successful year based on where they are. If they get to 20 wins, especially when they started 2-6 in the Big Ten,
Yeah.
I think this is a very positive season for this team.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's almost coming to an end. It's crazy we're this close. But Sunday, UCLA at Carver, that's a 1 p.m. tip. Wednesday, the 26th, so next Wednesday at Michigan in Ann Arbor, that's a 6 p.m. tip. And then a week from this Sunday, March the 2nd, Wisconsin for senior day at Carver Hawkeye Arena. And then it's off to the Big Ten tournament. We'll catch up with that again next week. Probably a good idea to take a little break now. We'll come back and talk some football. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. We'll be right back after this break. Hang in there. And we're back to let you know that switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights, we switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch. But what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give them a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Perez Brothers owned and operated, formerly of El Banditos and Perez Tacos. Great food, live music on the weekends. Check them out. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. What do you want to do here, Scott? You want to do the New Orleans trip or do you want to do the Combine?
Yeah, let's go with the New Orleans for now. And
Okay. Because just want to let folks know we got to cut out of here by like 10:30.
Yeah.
Scott's got somewhere else to be. He's got to talk about his Bears on a podcast. So he'll be reveling in that.
Caleb Johnson of the Bears.
Yes.
That's the discussion.
That would be a good fit, man.
Yeah,
that would be a good fit. But yeah, we'll talk some Combine if we can fit it in after this. But I think being a college football and college sports podcast, what happened in New Orleans this week probably supersedes that. So let's go with that. And as you said, no hard decisions made, but what did you see movement in?
Yeah, I think that there's some consensus among the Big Ten and SEC. First of all, I'll set the table there. Big Ten and SEC staffs and all the athletic directors that could make it made it to New Orleans for joint meetings and discussions over a lot of different topics. House settlement case, we won't bore you with the details there. And it was mainly just trying to get discussion and thoughts because they can't get into too many details in the weed. Otherwise, that's collusion.
Yeah.
So they got to avoid like, hey, everybody, let's all pay 70%. Yeah, that's not going to work. But I can tell you this, that the every AD that I've spoken with at the Big Ten level plans to pay up to the limit. So that's not going to change. But I think what we've saw with, but the CFP is probably the one to start with. And then the schedule, Big Ten potential change in the schedule, I think is relevant to that. The CFP is most likely going to expand after this year. This year, they all have to agree to any changes. Every conference and Notre Dame, they all have to agree.
That'd be 100% agreement, right?
Yeah, it has to be
tough.
unanimous with any changes. Like, say they decide, well, let's do seating differently.
Yeah,
that they have to do that. Well, if you're the Mountain West, or well, why would we want to do anything different? We got to buy plus more money because we got to buy. No, but next year, the Big Ten and SEC, while they can't just like unilaterally make changes, if they collectively decide this is what they want to do, then other teams have to decide if they want to go along with it, and if they are leagues, and if they don't, then they can get left out. And so basically it's Big Ten and SEC making the rules, and you can come and play in our game, but it's our game. And it's likely to expand 14 or 16. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's 16, because there are ADs saying, well, if we're going to go to 14, why don't we just go to 16?
Instead of going 14 and then 2 years later going 16 and just having to do it again anyway.
Yeah. So the Big Ten and SEC are pretty much in lockstep that they're going to demand guaranteed spots, because the leagues are, they're bigger than what they used to be, and they're deeper than what they used to be. The level of teams are pretty high at competition. We saw it this year. There were good teams in both leagues, better than, the Big Ten's fifth best team is better than the Big 12's third best team, that kind of thing. Right. And they, and they didn't want to phrase it this way. The question was asked this way: you just don't trust the committee, do you? And it's true, and among the discussions, and I'll kind of bring this into the other side, which is even more fascinating, is there weren't any discussions this time about kind of an SEC Big Ten jamboree, about playing one another, but it's there. And like Greg Sankey said, he goes, we had options. The options are still there. We just, with the House case finalized in a month and a half, and CFP that, they have meetings next week. All that's precedent. This is more down the road. But if you're Iowa and you're matching up with South Carolina, and you're both 7-2 in your conference, and you play a week 3 game against each other, doesn't matter, whichever location, and Iowa loses 20-17, and they're 9-3. The league feels, more so even than Iowa or another school, Wisconsin, take your pick, whatever, feels that they shouldn't be penalized for playing that game. Whereas a team like a 9-3, or let's say a 10-2 Duke, or even make it more local, an Iowa State at 10-2, shouldn't jump you, or Kansas State shouldn't jump you because you played that game. And oh, by the way, you're also playing an Ohio State or a Penn State or a Michigan, or take all those other teams, Oregon, all the way down the line. And so that's why there's a real push, Big Ten a little bit more so than the SEC, but for guaranteed spots for each of those leagues. So if you got 16 teams, the discussion is 4-4, 2-2-1, and which would be, now could there be some give and take? To me, I would almost say, if you're going to go 16, those two leagues should be guaranteed 2, plus the highest. To me, I would throw out there the highest ranked next team. So then it could be a Big 12 or an ACC team, but they're guaranteed combined 5 spots. I think that would be fair. But then you still have a couple left over for Notre Dame. Now here comes the change, and this is something that the SEC and Big Ten are differing on in their discussions. The Big Ten is looking for ways to maximize their opportunities to get teams into that guaranteed pool, which are play-in games. So on championship weekend right now, they're proposing 3 games, not just 1. So you'd have 1 versus 2, but you'd also have 3 versus 6 and 4 versus 5. And the winners of those games, both 1 and 2 are guaranteed. The winner of the 3-6 game and the winner of the 4-5 game are also guaranteed. And then a team that loses then would enter the at-large pool.
That makes sense.
So last year, Iowa is in that game against Indiana, 3 versus 6. And
would those be neutral sites, or could they pull something together like that quickly?
That's has not been decided yet, because I actually there are 2 thoughts, and this is something that we discussed both with staff and with ADs, or I did anyway. There's a thought, let's put those just at home sites. They've got the infrastructure in place, and like Iowa, you travel to Indiana, or Ohio State, you host Illinois, which is what the other
Yeah.
one would be. Or let's just make this one big freaking weekend in Indianapolis. Have a Friday night game, maybe a 3-6 game on Friday night. Then it's Saturday at noon Eastern time. You have Illinois, Ohio State, and then at 7 or 8 o'clock, I guess, Eastern time, then you have the championship game. You could do it that way too, and maybe or a combination of both.
They'd really be out of beer.
Yeah, exactly. It would be nuts. Last year wasn't so much of a problem with Penn State and Oregon. Two teams had to fly. But,
Yeah.
but Indianapolis would be out of hotel rooms.
Yes. And there are a lot of hotel rooms in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I
that
know.
would take some doing. But if you had 3 college or 6 college Big Ten fan bases there, boy, that would be gridlock.
Yeah, you would really hope for one of them to be Indiana, just so they wouldn't be staying there. But well, maybe they would be anyway. But anyway, that's the
I kind of like that idea.
Yeah, and so if Iowa would upset Indiana, and part of that is the Indiana situation last year, which was it wasn't their fault at all. I've been backing them up that they beat the 2 teams that played for the championship the year before.
Yeah.
It's not their fault that Michigan and Washington weren't as good as what they were the year before. And they beat Nebraska decisively, and Nebraska was a bowl team and stuff. But their resume looked light because other teams didn't perform. This way they could validate it, have an extra data point, and look good doing it, and they'd be in anyway. Or, you know what? They were a product of their schedule, that they were 11-1 in the regular season, and then they play Iowa, and Iowa just plays Iowa football and pulls them down in the water and drowns them in the mud and wins 13-10. And then Iowa gets to go,
And that gives the reason I like that is I think we had an example of that this season, Scott, when we got to a point in the season where Iowa's out. They can't make the college football playoff. And it was early on and earlier than a lot of people wanted. If you got a chance to get in that top 6, a lot of teams are going to be vying for that all the way through the season. Creates more interest.
Exactly. Because look at last year. Yeah, exactly. Last season, they lost to Iowa State. And it was like, oh man, now your back's against the wall. Then you go to Ohio State. It's like you're crossing your fingers and hoping you can reach that point. And I think if they would have won out, they still wouldn't have gotten in.
Probably not.
And then when you lose to Michigan State on the road, you're done.
Yep.
And you look in the previous years, you had the West Division that provided you with that opportunity to get there. That's gone. And now you have the opportunity to reach the playoff when you do that. So that's why there is some interest in this plan. And the SEC's actually talked about 1 versus 8 and 2 versus 7. And, then there are other ideas and thoughts of, these are my own, is instead of making it a separate weekend, because there's already too many games, make it a part of the regular season. So it's like the last week is like matchup week.
Mm-hmm.
And you just start saying, you know what, Iowa and Indiana didn't play during the season, and they're 3-6. Let's have them play. And then, now you'd have to figure out, who gets to host, because so there's a lot of logistics involved. But or you look at it and go, wow, Iowa and Illinois, one's, they've got the same record in the Big Ten. They're both 6-3. They didn't play this year. That's a fun game. Or Michigan State and Wisconsin, you're both 5-6. The winner gets to go to a bowl game, stuff like that. It's the last week of the season has been reserved for rivalries. You can bump that up a week. You can make it, the old days. So those are the things that have been discussed that they've all kind of universally said, look, we need to get the CFP component done for this coming year first, the next year second, and then we can figure out all this other stuff. But these are the things that they're discussing. So it does bring interest and value to the regular season, and it doesn't cut off the importance. Now, people can say Iowa at 8-4 has no business getting in the playoff, and they're maybe not wrong, but Clemson didn't deserve to get in the playoff either, and they got it. So,
and I like that element. Deserves, well, they won.
Yeah.
I don't care whether you think they deserve to be in. The other team should have beat them if they didn't want them in there. So yeah, that shit doesn't fly with me. But I just like what you're talking about here, just keeping as many fan bases engaged along into the season as far as you can. And then at the end, give them some excitement. Hey, we win this, we're in.
Yeah.
We still got a chance. We can win this game. And I love it.
Yeah. And think of it this way, that imagine if you do get that, it's at home and
Yeah.
you're playing Oregon at Kinnick Stadium the first weekend of December, or you're playing Penn State, and holy shit, this game's for a chance to go to the playoff, essentially.
Yeah.
That's pretty heightened. Now maybe you get to host a playoff game after that, and you got to think about now how much of that revenue goes to the league versus the schools. My guess is that the gate revenue probably goes to the league, but you got to keep a lot of the other stuff. Of course they'll pay you for your workers and whatever, but that's going to be pretty damn exciting, and there's going to be a lot of people going to these games. So that's something I think it's got a lot of momentum, because the leagues want to decide how they get there on their own, and like the Big 12 and everybody else could do things differently. Hell, if I were in the G5, make it like old bracket busters.
Yeah.
And figure out your own way to get there and make it, create revenue and interest. And it's like Mountain West versus the AAC champion. So you got Boise State playing Army or Navy or something like that. I think people would dig that.
Yep.
So make college football more interesting. It's already interesting, but add to the value of it. I think that's what this is all about.
Put a bow on this discussion, Scott. What's next?
Well, this coming week is the next iteration of the CFP meetings, and it's in Dallas. I think it's Tuesday, and that's when the commissioners will finalize the next phase for this year, and really start in earnest, in my opinion, they'll start in earnest the discussion for the next era, which begins with the 26th season. So that's kind of what'll happen there. And then beyond that, with it, they're all kind of on pins and needles about the House settlement. Once that gets finalized and the way it will, then everybody beyond that, they'll kind of figure out, okay, here's the next phase of life, and we'll get to that part. Everybody's going to pay their athletes, and then they'll figure out football in the future and go from there. And then the SEC and Big Ten want to play each other more. What does that mean for Iowa? It's hard to say, because they can't play everybody every year, because there's 18 teams in one league and 16 in the other. Iowa, Oregon, and Washington have in-state rivalries, just like in the SEC. You have Kentucky plays Louisville, Clemson, South Carolina, Florida State, Georgia Tech. So there's going to be some questions about how that fits. Which ones are important? Which ones do they say, just don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. We don't need to play everybody. Or once every couple of years, we want you involved in this, and we'll figure out a way to make the finances work. We'll figure out a way so you can keep playing in Iowa State or in Oregon State or Louisville, and then the SEC has their own component with getting up to 9 regular season games. And that's a tough thing for them too. So, but anyway, so that's next after this.
All right, we've got about 10 more minutes here. Let's finish up with some combine talk. Scott and I were talking before we started recording about the Jamari Harris situation, so we'll touch on that quickly, and then we'll talk about the rest of the guys. Jamari, if you remember, at the end of the season, and if you're an Iowa fan, I'm sure you do, opted out for the last 2 regular season games and the bowl game. I have a story coming out on Jamari next week, and I think I read the quotes on here back after I interviewed him, Scott, just about him talking about, and Kirk talked about it too, about, different thresholds for pain, and can you play with the injury? Can you not play with the injury? All that stuff will be talked about with Jamari in Indianapolis. He'll be asked about it. He'll be asked about the situation. And as we said, Scott, general managers will come down probably on different sides of this and have different views of what happened at the end of the season with Jamari. There are I think the more traditional, he quit on his team folks. And then there are the business NFL people that are like, hey, is he a good value in this round? Because can he cover, and can he help us if we take him here? And, he backed out on his team, but that's old news. We're worried about what he can do for us in the future.
exactly. And there are different elements in play today than there were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember when Christian McCaffrey backed out of the Sun Bowl, and that was like, oh my God, what is he doing? And then Leonard Fournette did the same thing, and oh, this is going to ruin bowl games. And now it's commonplace. If you are a good player and you're going to be a high round pick, your chances are, yeah. And Caleb did it. Hell, Kayvon Merriweather did it.
Yeah.
The next round of that is kind of what Jamari did. Now, he did have an issue with his ankle. I believe it was his ankle, right? That was something he needed to get worked on. How much of it? I mean, he did go and participate and play in all-star games. So, he did have to take care of that.
Yep.
So that's anybody who's interested in him will have the opportunity to talk to him there. And so it will be interesting to see which teams do that. Everybody's going to do.
People talk to the Iowa people too, and what is their view of what he did?
Yeah, and Iowa people will be careful in how they present it, because it is a fine line. You don't want to just torch a kid, and somebody.
And I thought Kirk's response was pretty diplomatic. I think he kind of covered everything that both sides of thought.
Yeah, and there will be, as you said, I think everybody will do their due diligence with this. All the NFL people. There won't be anybody who immediately walks out and goes, I'm not playing, I'm not looking at him, because they'll say, okay, this kid decided only a couple of days before the end of the season, basically 8-9 days or whatever, decided not to play the last 2 games. Why? What was going on? What did you do? What did you need to get done to it? How did it impact you in the way you played? Why? What kind of advice did you get? They're going to do all their due diligence, and then it's going to be up to them. And this is just anybody. We can have difference of opinions on this, and we do. And it's like, somebody will say, what? I just don't like that, because everybody's hurt in the NFL come late in the season, and we just can't have people walking away. And then there's going to be somebody saying, what? I kind of get it that your team wasn't really, they weren't playing for the 6th seed in the Big Ten tournament. Exactly. That you had 2 games left. This was bothering you. You were struggling with it. And this isn't something you should tell us, but it's understandable that I didn't want to put up any bad tape because, my ankle was bothering me, and they had the potential to do that. And people are going to make different decisions. And some are going to say, what, I'm taking him off my board. I need somebody who I can rely on that's willing to crawl out there and play. And then there's going to be other people saying, what, I completely understand it. If he's a value pick, if he's available in the 5th round, man, I'm taking this kid, because I think he's got every intangible that I want. And he didn't quit on his team. He just, made a business decision. And business decisions happen all the time in the NFL, where it's like, I have a torn pec muscle. If you guarantee my salary for next year, I'll play through it. Otherwise, I'm having surgery. My guess is you're gonna see 18 to 20 teams saying no, and 12 to 15 teams saying yes on him.
Here's something I think we can agree on. When people talk to Jamari and interview him and get to know him, I think they'll be pretty impressed. Again, they may have that feeling of, we don't like how he handled the situation, and that may take them out. But I think you and I can both advocate for Jamari the kid. And he put some good stuff on tape this year as well. But you're right. I mean, there are going to be people that are just like, nope. I think did you mention Dan Campbell?
On our side,
on our side conversation, but something like that. We don't know what Dan Campbell's thinking. I mean, if he's there in the 5th round, Dan Campbell may say, "Shit, we need a corner." He missed the last 2 games. Go for it.
Right.
So it's all because you have principle to a certain point, right? And then you're like, "Shit, he's in the." We're not passing on him here.
Well, and in fact, this isn't as bad to me as somebody who got arrested.
Oh, no.
And you're talking about somebody who got arrested for an OWI or even something worse, or flunked Their
And he has
classes.
he has those situations to deal with too. He's got the OWI and he's got the gambling thing.
Yeah,
So
right.
he's going to have a lot of meetings.
Yeah. And so there's people that say, you know what, that's too many red flags for me.
Yeah.
But then there's and then you walk in and they're like, I don't know. But then there's other people that said, you know what, he's got, if I was to grade him just on talent and personality, I'd probably put him at 100 on our board. I'm not gonna, but the red flag's knocking down to 200. If
Yeah.
he's available in the fifth or sixth round, and this happens with anybody, you see a lot of wide receivers who do something stupid in college or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but he's available in the sixth round. That we're not going to invest a lot financially in him, but we're going to invest enough to where we think he's good. And then he comes out and remember LeGarrette Blunt with his punch, and he
Yep.
didn't get drafted for it. But he got signed and he stuck around because he's a good player. And so, yeah, it's about, can you play in the league more than anything else? And I think he's capable of that. So,
Was it Laramie Tunsil with the weed mask?
yeah, that cost him millions of dollars. It cost him about 5 or 6 spots in the first round. But then Lyle Collins didn't get drafted because his ex-girlfriend was killed. And
Yeah.
he didn't do it. But all of a sudden the thoughts were like, well, what if he did? And it happened like right before the draft. And so then it was like, so nobody wanted to take that chance. He signed as a free agent, and it turned out he didn't have anything to do with it. But still, it was, you throw all those things into that in that factor. So,
And you're also dealing with college kids too. You're like, how much of this is just tomfoolery at that point in these people's lives? And that's why I think the interview process will be important for Jamari this week, because
yeah,
he can speak to, I made mistakes, because I think he'll own it. And he's
yeah,
always said it. He has always owned his mistakes.
yeah, exactly. And yeah, he's an engaging young man. He's got a lot of potential. He's a graduate. He's done, everything for the right reasons. This one's more ambiguous, and so it's not a true mistake as much as it
Yeah.
is his opinion. Did he get the right advice? Did he make the right decision? That one's more up to individuals.
Yeah.
An OWI is not hey, we can be different on opinions. There's a wrong, and if you don't agree with it, it's still wrong. I don't care. So you've got all of that kind of stuff. So I
He
think
lost his dad unexpectedly during college too. I mean, there's a lot going on here, and hopefully you guys read my story. I kind of go through all this. I hopefully have that done on and up on Hawk Fanatic
yeah,
as a combine preview. So
right.
check that out.
Yeah, but he's one of 7 guys going to the
Yeah, let's hit
combine.
the rest of the guys. Let's get them in here.
Yeah. So the first day, which is Wednesday of interviews, and then the workouts take place the following day. You've got YA Black and you got Jay Higgins, and I'm excited always to hear Jay. He holds court well, and so he'll be chatting away and in his hometown.
Yep.
So good for him. Thursday is Jamari and Sebastian Castro and Luke Lachey. So
That's an interesting trio there, man.
Mhm. Yeah. So that'll be fun. Friday is Caleb Johnson. So that will be he'll get a crowd, I'm sure, and I might have to be around him a little bit. But I also, like, that day I got to do some Texas stuff too. So, and then Saturday is Connor Colby, the offensive line. So 7 guys from Iowa. I was disappointed that Mason Richmond didn't get in. I still think he is a draft pick. 18 teams have to recommend you. So I guess you look at it for Jamari's perspective, that he did get to go to an all-star game. He did receive postseason recognition, and at least 18 teams thought that they wanted him there. So that means that at least some of those teams that may ultimately even say no get the opportunity to meet him either formally or informally. Formally
Right.
is a 15-minute interview. Informally is a bump in, talk to type of thing. So
I was happy for Colby too. I mean, that to his credit. I mean, that's a great opportunity for him.
yeah, exactly. You get a chance to do that. Mason had 16 teams recommend him.
That's a bummer.
And I'm like, yeah, he's not an NFL left tackle, but he's an NFL guard, in my opinion.
He'll end up going to Baltimore or Philadelphia, like lower than he should go, and then he'll end up starting.
Yeah. And they do have, the good thing is they do have an Iowa Pro Day.
Pro Day, yeah.
And then they have conversations there after
Yep.
that, and then they have their own visits that a lot of times teams will
Hmm.
call them up, hey, let's come out and chat and that sort of thing. So, um, I would expect all of them to be very strongly considered for the draft, if not drafted. YA Black is the one to me. It's going to be fascinating because I think he's been projected lower than what.
You saying you think he can help himself the most here in this during
Yeah,
this process?
yeah, I do, because his tape, he's a two gap defensive tackle that doesn't generate a lot of statistics,
Mhm.
but so that hurts him in perception in a lot of cases. But you look at the size, you meet him, he's very intellectual. And he's got a really depth of personality that doesn't come through a lot of times. I
He's
think he'll be
just
able to,
massive. Dude
yeah,
is huge, and it's like no fat. It's just
yeah,
a massive human being.
right. And so he'll be able to describe, look, I play a two gap scheme. A lot of times it's over the one gap or zero technique, and so I'm getting double teamed, and that's my job to take up those double teams so Jay Higgins can get 150 tackles a year, and people will see that on film. They'll meet him, how he does, and that's kind of irrelevant as much as we all glom on to, oh, what did he? That's more for corners and receivers. Is
Testing, you mean?
yeah, the testing. Now, if he goes out and benches 50 times, yeah, that's going to help him. But
Yeah.
I think he'll be, you know, I think in the meetings that'll probably help him, and likewise, it's really the variance and what people think of these players and how you fit their scheme and what they're at wanting people to do. Like YA could fit in as whether it's a nose tackle or
Hmm.
an interior defensive tackle for somebody who says, you know what, we don't necessarily need a pass rusher. We need a collapser. We need a guy who just takes double teams, collapses the pocket, because we've got a guy that can get the sacks. And Richard Seymour was the best that ever did it.
Yep.
His statistics, when you look at him, you're like, how's that guy in the Hall of Fame? And then all of a sudden you watch him and what he's asked to do and what he did, he's the best player on the field. He made 2 tackles, but he took up 2 blockers each and every time, and he collapsed the pocket and forced them to make bad throws. And I think YA is capable of that if he finds the right team. Just like Jamari, if 18 teams at least asked him to be there, and 7 of them decided, you know what, I just wanted to know more about this situation, I'm not really interested, but 11 are interested, and one of them says we really like him, then maybe he's a 4th rounder. It's really fascinating how it all kind of works out to me.
I know you got to get out of here, but I want to get you one more. This is my perception just based on what I've seen. Did Castro hurt himself by coming back? It seems like people are picking at his game more. And what can he do here in this process to get maybe some confidence back from folks that have lost it in him?
I don't think he hurt himself. I
Okay.
mean, I think, his statistics weren't what people expected or wanted, but I think he played just fine for the
Okay.
most part. I think what he can do is just like any defensive back, it's really about how do you, in some of those agility drills and the overall testing. Iowa players do outstanding. And when it comes to the agility drills, I mean, I think they coach it really well at Iowa, and he's going to go out and probably do well in that, the 3 cone and 20-yard dash and stuff like that. And I think he'll be fine there.
I think about the cash position can be a benefit for guys, but it also can be he's playing an odd position. Where does he fit for us?
Mm-hmm. And I think people are, because of the way Cooper DeJean played it, and he's
Hmm.
not the athlete Cooper is, but I would say he's a better hitter than Cooper is. But the cash position, how Cooper played it, and what it means to the next level will automatically get people's eyes on that. And he's a little bit thicker, a bigger hitter. He was taking on blockers a lot of times at the line of scrimmage that traditional defensive backs don't. I think he'll be okay. It's just the perception is this guy was good last year. He's going to be great this year. And then the
Yeah.
statistics don't measure up. And then all of a sudden, oh, he had a down year. That's the real evaluators don't see it that way. I save some of the dumbest takes on my phone. And one that, I forever have is somebody talking about Desmond King. He's like, he had a really bad senior year because he only had like 3 interceptions. And I'm like, Do you realize nobody threw his direction? Do you realize that? He still had a pick six, but the amount of opportunities he had one year versus the next,
Yeah.
completely different. And that's, again, you have people who watch it and people who look at the statistics, and then they watch the Senior Bowl practices and, oh, he got beaten, he got torched in this one-on-one drill. You're gonna get torched in one-on-one drills. It's just the way it is. So, because he's a zone corner. He's a boundary corner. He's not a field corner one-on-one guy. And so, yeah, I think Castro will be fine. Jay, I think it matters for what he runs, because there's going to be, he's a great tackler, great hitter, intangibles off the charts. He'll get the highest praise from his staff, but I think he also will be, they'll be like, okay, how quick is he? How can he do this? And Luke is kind of the same breath, he may have hurt himself when you look statistically, but then again, how much of that was quarterback, which is a lot, and
Scheme.
scheme, just the, quarterback really was
a big part of it. But I mean, I think they figured out early on what they had in Caleb Johnson, and they knew Luke could block, and they're like, well, and I think his blocking film this year will help him.
Absolutely. Like our guys, the two, we have two evaluators who are really, really good. Dane Brugler is the best in the business, and Nick Baumgartner, who covers a lot of college, but also is primary an evaluator. They saw him in the East West Shrine Bowl practices, and they've been very high in their praise of Luke. And they're like, you look at him and you say, Iowa tight end, guy blocks, he knows how to block, he knows how to position himself, he catches the ball smooth, he's in and out of breaks, he's does all the things you ask him to do. He just probably won't be drafted as high as maybe we would have thought a year ago at this time.
Yeah, somebody will get a steal. There's no doubt about that. I have pretty good confidence that Luke will be a good pro, as I do with some of these other guys in this thing too. I'm always interested to see this time of year, to see how this process plays out for these guys, where they go, and then what they can do after that. It just seems like every year there's a story that comes out of Iowa in the draft, and then they do something in the rookie seasons and beyond in the NFL too. So always interesting and stuff, cool stuff to keep tabs on, and we will do that. Scott, as I said, will be in New Orleans he'll be in Indianapolis next week at the Combine. We will have a different time, but we'll also be able to pick Scott's brain for what he's seeing down there, and I'll give you a time on Twitter when that will be. Hopefully give you a decent amount of heads up, so look out for that. But thank you guys for listening today. Thank you so much to our sponsors, and we will talk at you next.